So my name is Brendan Shaklovitz. I'm an SRE with the Stride and HipChat teams at Atlassian. And as Alon mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you about how to use Terraform to automate your Datadog configurations around monitors and time boards. So a little bit about, we'll be talking about how we got started at Atlassian, kind of the origin story of using Terraform to manage this, how we would get started using this, and where Atlassian's thinking about using Terraform to go next, because there's some really interesting things that we could do with Datadog that we're not quite doing yet, at least not in Terraform. So I'll be talking about that as well. So a little bit of a story time. This is about kind of how we got started using it. So I don't know the exact timeline. I'm recreating it kind of from things I've heard from other people in Atlassian, Git history. But one of the Atlassians, when we started using Datadog, his name's Otto Jungarius, and he really quickly found that using the UI for Datadog to manage many services was very difficult. It works well for a handful of services, but when you start having multiple teams with different PagerDuty rosters, different thresholds that you need to set and that sort of thing, and you want some sort of consistency across them, it's really difficult to manage manually. So when he was faced with this problem, he created the Terraform Datadog provider. I think he had about 200 or so commits by himself over the next year, and then it got merged into the mainline Terraform providers, and now has been split out. And I've contributed a little bit, not nearly as much as Otto, but I have used Terraform quite a bit within Atlassian. So 80% of statistics are made up. So I'm going to just show a graph that doesn't really mean anything. But I want you to, so this is very familiar in computer science in big O notation. So imagine the red line being managing things manually, where initially it's very easy. You spend less time, but when you add more services, that being the x-axis, things get very difficult very quickly. And Terraform, I imagined as the blue line, where it's a little bit more difficult up front. There's some investment to get it set up, but once you have it set up, it saves you a lot of time. And as you add more and more services, as many of you are moving from monolith to microservices, you'll find that Terraform will save you a lot of time and effort. So real quick, this is what Terraform, a very simple monitor template may look like. I've removed a lot of the complex bits that we would normally have here. And this is a template showing, like, OK, I could pass in a variable saying, this is my service name, and this is the threshold for this specific service. And this is the, and the PagerDuty roster is going to be based off of that service. As an example, it could be a different variable for team or something like that. And the way that you would use this is something like this, where for my example, these are the two variables where you could set the threshold and the service name. And going back really quickly, you can see on the 5th line where it says query equals min last 5 minutes, average latency. We're looking at a monitor for the 99th percentile for whichever service with a specific threshold. And so now I've got an example of what these actually end up looking like when you run Terraform. So you get something like this. This is like an actual one from our production environment for one of the services, and you see it kind of sets a nice template. This is a much more complicated example than what I just showed. But you can kind of templatize these and make them super easy. We've also done this for dashboards. The example that I have for the dashboards is just the picture of the dashboard, because they are very long, and I couldn't fit it into 15 minutes. So here's what the dashboard, an example of the dashboard. This is in a dev environment, showing some of the things you might show, like latency, error rates, number of requests. You could have these templated to do, like if you're using Kafka, show like the latency, like the lag between when the message entered the queue and when you're processing it, queue size, that sort of thing. It really depends on what you're using. But you can set up these really useful templates so that a service can just copy a small template file, set a handful of variables, and then get something like this that may take quite some time to set up with all the formatting, and they would be very inconsistent if you did this for, say, 500 services by hand. So just a little recap of what benefits you're getting from using Terraform. It's automation friendly. So the way that we have this set up is we have a Bitbucket pipelines build set up, but you could set this in Travis CI, Bamboo, whatever you're using for your CI system, to where any branch builds, like in a pull request, for example, will run Terraform validate and Terraform plan to show here's what changes would happen if you were to apply this. And you can compare that and say, oh, I didn't think that's what I was actually doing, and look at it before actually I'm doing the merge. And then when you merge to master, have it automatically run Terraform apply, which would go ahead and apply your changes to Datadog, where you could have, if you're making a change to a template, you could change hundreds of alerts at the same time. And this would take something like 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. So it's very fast. Rather than taking hours to go through by hand and possibly mess up, get some very consistent results. And you can have a history of them in Git. So you can say, oh, 3 months ago, we had this alert look like this, and now it looks like this, if you wanted to. So next up, I'm going to be talking a little bit about where we're thinking about going with our usage of Terraform. So right now, we have kind of templates in some of our teams that do things like latency alerting, error rates, things like saturation, memory, disks, CPU, that sort of thing. And then also separate templates for things that use Kafka, things that are using Cassandra, all sorts of things, really. But they're all very simple monitors. It's just like, OK, here's the threshold or an anomaly detection. But we're not yet using composite monitors. And that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, is how you might go about using those in Terraform. So in this example, I've just made 2 monitors, monitor 1 and monitor 2. The content of the monitors in this case doesn't really matter. Just to give you an idea of this is what they would be called. And then the way that I would make my composite monitor is I'd say, OK, the query is the monitor 1 ID or the monitor 2 ID. If either of those are going off, I want to alert. So Datadog lets you do things like, OK, if A or B are firing and not C, then I want to throw an alert. And we're not really using that where I think that we should be, to reduce a lot of the noise of like, oh, if the database is having problems, we probably don't want to alert 10 teams and wake up everyone overnight. It should probably just go to the team managing the database. Or if it's something with a third party, we can know that we want to wake up our person internally that's going to be talking to them, but probably not everyone using the third party, as an example. The other thing, I don't have a slide for it because I can't yet manage it in Terraform, but what I would like to manage in Terraform is the screen boards. So there doesn't exist there's not a screen board provider yet. I'm wearing this Atlassian Ship It shirt, which is our quarterly hackathon. It's 24 hours to just do whatever you want. So if I were there today, I would probably be working on the screenboard provider. I'm missing it to attend the summit. But that's something that I want to add into the Terraform code to manage the screenboards in code as well. So those are the things that I think we're not quite doing yet that we should be. And I'm sure that there are other ones, and I'd love to talk to you about it afterwards. I think I have a couple minutes for questions. So if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Yep, definitely have a few minutes for questions. Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat that?
Could you talk a little bit more about how you implement templates?
Sure. So the way that you do it kind of is you kind of arrange it's based off of folders in the file system. So it's like, here's my as an example of how you might do it. Here's services that do handle REST requests. And so for that type of service, I probably care about latency, error rates. Like there's some things that I may care about for that type of service. And I would have a separate folder for, say, something that uses Kafka and like each of the other dependencies. And then what I would do, I pull back the slide. What I would do here is the module would say source, and then it would have the folder name. Source equals, say, HTTP service, and then set variables for it. And then I'd have a separate module and say module service one Kafka monitors, and then source the Kafka monitor folders. I did something similar to that. If I had a very common configuration, like a handful of common configurations where it was, I know that in my company, for like, if I knew that we only used, say, REST services with Kafka and REST services with Cassandra, and I could set up like a composite of the two folders and kind of combine them, and have some more advanced configurations set up if I needed to.
How would you implement the screenboard provider? Have you think about that?
So I've looked at doing it. It's a lot of boilerplate Go code, honestly. I haven't looked at doing it specifically. I've started to look at the Screenboard API. It would require knowing how to read the Screenboard from the API, how to update it, how to delete them, and what the structure of it looks like in JSON. And then marshalling and demarshalling that in Go would be the vast majority of that work.
I mean, are you going to include some templates, or you want to just make a provider and make some API for people who want to create their own templates using your API?
I'm not sure that I can answer the question, but find me afterwards and I'll talk with you about it.
For the features that you support, like monitors and the time series, how comprehensive or how much of the full Datadog API do you support there, and what's missing? Maybe what's missing that you would like it to be there and it's not there?
Okay, that's a great question. So for the monitors, I believe, unless there's other features that I'm not aware of from Datadog, the whole monitor scope is supported. For the time boards, when I started using it, only a subset of the features, like graph them, but not the parts that make them pretty, like formatting them with markers and lines, that didn't exist. I've since added that in. So as far as I know, all of the time board features are supported. One of the things that I would like from Datadog would be a more comprehensive schema documentation for all of those types. So knowing okay, if I set this in the UI, this is the type that I get back, and this is what it will actually look like. Because a lot of times when developing these Terraform things, only a very small subset of this is actually documented. So it's like, okay, I need to go create this, then go look at what it looks like, and kind of do the mapping myself. So that would be the biggest work with the screen, making the screen board one, is finding all of those features.